January 17, 1941. Berlin. The bitter wind cut through narrow streets like a blade, rattling shutters and scattering scraps of frozen paper. Street lamps flickered over cobblestones slick with frost. Inside a fortified intelligence building on Wilhelmstrasse, guards doubled their patrols, rifles resting at their sides, eyes scanning every shadow. Every door was locked, every window barred. Security protocols had never been stricter. Yet, in the dim glow of a corridor, a lone figure moved with deliberate grace. Each step was measured, each breath controlled. A faint rustle of fabric, a glint of metal hidden beneath a coat. Inside, officers huddled over maps, unaware that one of their most critical secrets, plans that could shift the balance of war, was about to be exposed. The spy paused, eyes narrowing on the target, a heavily guarded office containing encrypted communications and top-secret dossiers. Time seemed to stretch. The guards, confident in their doubled numbers, didn't notice the shadows slipping past them. Every heartbeat carried the weight of nations, every movement a gamble with life itself. In that quiet, frozen moment, the impossible was about to happen. One man, or one woman, was about to walk right through them. By 1940, Europe was a continent reshaped by the relentless machinery of war. Germany had swept through Poland in September 1939 with blitzkrieg precision. France had fallen, Belgium and the Netherlands subdued, and Britain stood isolated, bracing for the possibility of invasion. Across these theaters of conflict, victory relied not only on tanks and planes but on information, knowledge of enemy movements, plans, and intentions. Intelligence had become the invisible battlefield upon which the fate of nations turned. Within Germany, the Abwehr, the military intelligence service, was tasked with defending the Reich from espionage while conducting its own clandestine operations abroad. Yet, the organization was riddled with contradictions. Its leadership, under Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, was nominally loyal to Hitler but privately skeptical of the Nazi regime. Rivalries festered between the Abwehr, the Sicherheitsdienst, SD, and the Gestapo, creating overlapping jurisdictions, gaps in security, and occasional lapses that would later prove fatal. Guards could be doubled, doors bolted, protocols rigid, but bureaucracy and personal politics left vulnerabilities in even the most fortified installations. Across the Channel, Britain's MI6 and Special Operations Executive were actively cultivating networks within occupied Europe. Agents were recruited from every corner: academics, diplomats, refugees, soldiers, and even those with criminal pasts. Training was intense but rushed. Operatives learned to encode messages, adopt false identities, and navigate enemy cities under the constant threat of capture. For each mission, the intelligence services faced a brutal arithmetic. Success meant lives saved or campaigns shortened. Failure meant imprisonment, torture, or death. Meanwhile, communications technology was both an ally and a liability. Germany relied heavily on Enigma machines and radio codes, assuming encryption offered impenetrable security. But Allied cryptanalysts at Bletchley Park were beginning to break these codes, turning even intercepted routine messages into invaluable intelligence. Every letter, Every message, every guard rotation could tip the scales if analyzed correctly. Within Berlin, the city pulsed with the contradictions of wartime life. Citizens moved through rationed streets, unaware of the operations unfolding in their midst. Air raid drills were routine, yet the enemy often came not from the skies but from the shadows. The silent agents slipping past doubled guards, infiltrating offices, and extracting secrets with methodical precision. Inside the very building on Wilhelmstrasse, the nave center of German intelligence, officials believed their documents were untouchable. In reality, their confidence was precisely the vulnerability that would be exploited. The stakes could not have been higher. Allied planners knew that every German strategy, every troop deployment, and every operation hinged on secrecy. If information from Berlin fell into enemy hands, entire campaigns could be rerouted, lives lost or saved, and the psychological advantage shifted. It was within this tension-filled environment, where guards patrolled diligently, bureaucrats trusted procedure, and officers relied on encryption, that a spy would find the opening few believed existed. Every aspect of the spy's task demanded courage and precision. A misstep in the streets of Berlin, a glance from a guard, a misjudged timing could mean capture and a public warning to all would-be infiltrators. Yet, intelligence operatives thrived on these risks, understanding that war was not won solely by armies but by the unseen currents of information flowing through cities, across borders, and into the hands of those willing to walk unseen through fortified corridors. In this world of heightened surveillance and overlapping authorities, where even doubled guards could be outmaneuvered, the stage was set for an audacious infiltration. A single agent, trained and prepared, could change the course of operations without ever firing a shot, simply by entering a room that everyone else assumed was secure. And in that frozen Berlin winter, the impossible was about to unfold. By late 1940, the network of spies operating across Europe had become a shadow war within the visible conflict. Intelligence agencies, both Axis and Allied, were engaged in a deadly chess game. Every agent recruited, every courier dispatched, and every coded message transmitted carried immense stakes. In cities like Berlin, Paris, and Warsaw, the tension was palpable. Streets appeared ordinary, yet beneath the surface, operations moved like clockwork, unseen but precise. The German Abwehr, despite its reputation, was far from infallible. Their procedures were elaborate but predictable, entrances monitored, guards stationed at key points, offices locked with heavy bolts. High-value documents were stored in vaults, keys controlled by multiple officers. Patrols doubled during critical times, and checkpoints were manned round the clock. Yet, human nature remained the weakest link. Officers grew complacent, trusting that the very act of doubling guards would make their positions untouchable. Routine created blind spots, and blind spots became opportunities. On the other side, Allied intelligence understood this perfectly. MI6 and the Special Operations Executive meticulously studied these patterns. They gathered information from defectors, intercepted communications, and even casual observations of guard habits. An agent could learn when patrols rotated, which doors were often left ajar, in which officers could be persuaded or distracted. This knowledge was painstakingly accumulated over months, sometimes years, forming a blueprint for infiltration. Security wasn't just a matter of manpower, it was also psychological. Fear of internal betrayal ran deep in German intelligence circles. Officers were trained to suspect outsiders but often overlooked insiders or those who appeared insignificant. Couriers carrying innocuous items, a package, a letter, a briefcase, were less likely to attract scrutiny. Exploiting these subtleties required patience and audacity in equal measure. Several spy networks had already demonstrated the effectiveness of this approach. Networks like the Red Orchestra in Germany and Belgium, the Double Cross system in Britain, and the activities of individuals like Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Gabo, proved that intelligence could penetrate even the most fortified environments. Each successful operation taught agents that the strength of security lay not in walls or guards, but in the human assumptions behind them. A single misjudgment, a moment of overconfidence, could unravel months of meticulous work. In Berlin, these lessons were yet to be fully appreciated. The building on Wilhelmstrasse, a hub of German military intelligence, represented the pinnacle of perceived security. Guards patrolled every floor, locks clicked with precision, and alarms were tested frequently. Yet, for Allied operatives, this very confidence was a map of vulnerabilities. They noted when officers became predictable, when corridors were quietest, when doors were checked less rigorously. Every small detail mattered. Moreover, technology, while advanced for its time, created opportunities. Encrypted messages and communications equipment were designed to secure information, but their handling often revealed patterns. The reliance on routine radio transmissions, message scheduling, and codebooks created predictable behaviors. A skilled spy could observe, memorize, and exploit these behaviors without touching a single machine. It was in this environment, a city seemingly impregnable, a security apparatus both disciplined and flawed, a war where information outweighed brute force, that the conditions for a successful infiltration existed. Doubled guards, high walls, and locked doors could not counter human ingenuity, patience, and courage. In Berlin's cold, shadowed corridors, one agent would soon walk through layers of perceived security, uncover critical secrets, and demonstrate that even the tightest defenses could be circumvented. The question was not whether the spy could get inside, but whether the intelligence extracted could alter the course of operations and, ultimately, the war itself. The next stage of this story begins with the perspective of the operatives themselves, their training, tactics, and the stakes they faced in carrying out an impossible mission. A spy's success depended on nerves of steel. Fear was constant, but it was controlled, measured, and converted into action. Operatives were trained to observe without being seen, to memorize details in a glance, to blend into the rhythm of daily life even in enemy cities. They relied on instincts honed by months of training and long hours of observation. In Berlin, the spy moving through Wilhelmstrasse had to anticipate every human reaction. A guard adjusting his cap, an officer pausing over a document, a colleague distracted by routine. Each interaction carried danger. The smallest error, hesitation, a glance, a misstep, could mean immediate exposure. Yet, for those who succeeded, the reward was not personal glory but strategic impact. Intelligence gained could save thousands of lives or prevent a catastrophic military blunder. This human element was what differentiated a trained operative from an ordinary infiltrator. Patience, composure, and mental agility were just as critical as physical skill. A spy had to remain calm under pressure, make split-second decisions, and maintain a false persona convincingly. Every heartbeat was measured, every movement deliberate, every thought weighed against consequences. Infiltration was never random. Every step, every pause, every route was meticulously planned. Allied intelligence observed patterns in guard rotations, identifying gaps where security appeared airtight. Doors were not just locked, they were monitored. Patrols doubled, but doubled patrols still moved predictably. The spy exploited these patterns. Entry was timed for moments when hallways were quietest. Distractions were engineered subtly. A dropped package, a passing officer, a misdirected glance. In one instance, an operative might pause to examine a plaque on the wall, creating the illusion of an innocuous presence while mapping escape routes. Movement inside the building followed strict protocols. No running, no abrupt gestures. The operative flowed with the environment, appearing as just another civilian, another staff member. Tactical success depended on anticipating not only security measures but human tendencies, predictability, overconfidence, and assumptions about safety. Technology was both shield and vulnerability. German intelligence relied on Enigma machines, radio communications, and document encryption. These devices created an illusion of invulnerability. Messages were encoded, transmitted, and stored in a way that suggested absolute security. Yet, even the most sophisticated machines left traces, routine usage, predictable handling, and human error. Spies observed signal patterns, identified habits of officers operating the equipment, and noted weak points. Understanding technology meant more than operating it. It meant anticipating how others interacted with it. A single overlooked procedure, a habitual shortcut, or a poorly secured desk could provide access to crucial intelligence without ever touching the device. This exploitation of both technology and human handling magnified the spy's effectiveness. It was a silent war where observation, patience, and analytical thinking were more powerful than weapons or brute force. Even the best security was shaped by the decisions of commanders. Officers trusted routines, protocols, and layers of oversight. Orders dictated guard positions, locked schedules, and patrol routes. Leadership assumed compliance and diligence, but it could not account for ingenuity in the field. In the Wilhelmstrasse building, a single decision, a change in patrol timing, a shift in key access, or even misplaced confidence created vulnerabilities. Leaders relied on hierarchy to enforce security, yet human error was inevitable. Ambitious officers, bureaucratic delays, or miscommunication compounded risk. The spy's success often hinged not on breaking technology or evading guards alone, but on understanding and exploiting the chain of command. Strategic oversight became a double-edged sword. Leaders designed defenses expecting disciplined execution, but their assumptions about discipline and loyalty sometimes opened doors that no lock could truly secure. From the German perspective, security was presumed impenetrable. Officers believed that doubled guards, locked doors, and encrypted communications created a fortress against espionage. Yet, history shows that even the most meticulous systems could be outwitted. Counterintelligence units constantly analyzed suspicious activity, interrogated suspects, and monitored communications, but their methods were reactive rather than anticipatory. When a spy entered Wilhelmstrasse unnoticed, it revealed a critical truth. Human intuition and vigilance could not fully replace adaptability. Officers often focused on external threats, foreign spies, infiltrators from occupied territories, while overlooking those who appeared familiar, mundane, or harmless. The double guard system, while effective against direct assault, could not account for subtle deception, careful timing, and psychological manipulation. In many cases, enemy countermeasures relied on procedural adherence. Guards expected colleagues to follow orders precisely. Any deviation created confusion, and spies exploited that uncertainty. The infiltration exposed a systemic flaw. Security protocols, no matter how robust, depended on human consistency, and humans were predictably inconsistent under pressure, fatigue, or complacency. The consequences of such lapses went beyond embarrassment. Vital documents, troop movements, and operational plans could be compromised. Even brief exposure could force entire campaigns to adjust. The enemy's reliance on procedure and assumption became the very vulnerability the spy exploited. Espionage was never clean. Beyond tactics and technology, it carried profound moral and psychological weight. The spy navigated a world where a single misstep could result in execution. Yet the operation's success could save thousands. Each act of deception imposed an ethical calculus. Loyalty, duty, and survival collided in tense, silent moments. For those within the enemy ranks, betrayal by an unseen hand shattered trust. Officers grew suspicious of colleagues, questioning motives, and second-guessing routines. Paranoia permeated offices, eroding cohesion and morale. Civilians caught in the periphery faced suspicion, arrest, or coercion, often for no more than being in the wrong place at the wrong time. For the spy, the psychological toll was relentless. Constant vigilance, isolation, and the pressure of manipulating reality without leaving traces demanded extraordinary mental discipline. Every action was a negotiation with fear. Every glance could mean life or death. Yet, those who endured carried the knowledge that intelligence could shift the trajectory of war. The ethical ambiguity, the moral tension of harming to protect, became the hidden currency of espionage. In this interplay of human courage, enemy fallibility, and moral complexity, the infiltration transformed from a technical operation into a profound human drama. And as the spy moved through Wilhelmstrasse corridors, Every silent step brought the operation closer to its decisive moment, the climax that would reverberate far beyond the building itself. The morning of February 3rd, 1941, began like any other in central Berlin. A thin fog clung to the streets, muffling footsteps and dulling the glare of the early sun. Inside Wilhelmstrasse, the nerve center of German intelligence, routine dictated the day. Guards moved in precise intervals. Officers consulted schedules, and clocks carried stacks of encrypted messages with methodical care. The building was a fortress, or so its occupant believed. Outside, a lone figure approached, coat pulled tight against the winter chill. The spy had observed this building for weeks, noting every rhythm. When guards swapped posts, which stairwells were seldom checked, the times when officers lingered too long over tea or paperwork. Months of patient observation had culminated in this moment. Timing was everything. A second too early, a pause too long, and the operation would fail before it began. At 9:14, the spy entered through a side entrance, an overlooked corridor used by messengers and maintenance staff. Guards were present, rifles slung, eyes scanning. Yet familiarity proved deceptive. These men expected only routine interruptions, not a calculated intrusion. The spy moved with deliberate ease, walking as if belonging, a shadow among shadows. Every step was silent, measured, rehearsed. The first checkpoint passed without suspicion. A nod to a distracted officer, a glance at the floor to avoid catching the light on a polished buckle, and the hall beyond opened. Inside, the building's interior was a labyrinth of offices and vaults. Doors clicked closed behind the spy, each lock inspected mentally but not physically tampered with. At 9:22, the operative reached the communications wing, the heart of German intelligence operations. Rows of Enigma machines lined the tables, while officers transcribed and encoded messages. The spy paused, observing the layout, memorizing desk positions, identifying which documents were within reach. Precision dictated every action. With a small, concealed toolkit, the spy extracted key documents, taking only what was essential. Encrypted messages, operational plans, and troop movement schedules were carefully photographed or memoized for later transmission. Each second stretched into an eternity. One guard's footstep, one raised eyebrow, could end the mission. Yet the spy's movements were fluid, rehearsed, almost imperceptible, like a dancer moving through a stage of life and death. At 9:38, a near discovery almost ended the operation. A junior officer lingered in the corridor outside the communications room, idly flipping a key in his hand. The spy froze, pressed into the shadows, heartbeat hammering. Time slowed. The officer glanced at the doorway, muttered a passing comment, then moved on. The spy exhaled only after the danger had passed, a momentary surge of relief fueling the next series of actions. The extraction was just as critical as the entry. By 9:52, the operative retraced steps through stairwells and side corridors, avoiding main hallways where officers were gathering. An unplanned encounter, a courier carrying routine paperwork, required quick improvisation. A subtle hand gesture, a brief bow, and the illusion of belonging preserved the mission. Every move was a negotiation with the building itself, with the guards, with the invisible clock counting down seconds of exposure. By 10:05, the spy exited the building unnoticed, carrying intelligence that would ripple through the corridors of power. The double guards, the locked doors, the alarms, all had been circumvented, not by force, but by observation, patience, and audacity. Outside, the city seemed unchanged, oblivious to the infiltration that had just occurred. The fog still hung over Berlin, hiding the invisible paths through which secrets now traveled. Even as the spy vanished into the streets, German counterintelligence remained unaware. Reports would later note only routine entries, a misplaced file, a brief discrepancy in logs. Yet the information acquired had already begun to influence Allied operations. The operation demonstrated a critical truth. The most formidable defenses were only as strong as the humans enforcing them, and even doubled guards could be outmaneuvered. In that single, tense hour, the tide of intelligence had subtly shifted. The spies' actions would force German leaders to rethink security, alter operational schedules, and confront the unsettling reality that secrecy could be breached not by bombs or bullets, but by a shadow walking silently through a hall. The story of this infiltration was far from over. The consequences were immediate, strategic, and psychological, setting the stage for the next pivotal moments of this operation. The moment the spy exited Wilhelmstrasse, the operation was far from over. The intelligence obtained, encrypted communications, troop movement schedules, and strategic plans needed to reach Allied hands. Every step outside the building carried peril. Street patrols, checkpoints, and informants could expose the mission. Berlin, cold and fog-laden, appeared indifferent, but the city's eyes were everywhere. The spy navigated carefully, blending into the flow of workers and civilians. Couriers, safe houses, and predetermined drop points had been established with meticulous care. By mid-morning, the stolen documents were safely hidden, photographed, and transmitted via coded radio signals. The information began to ripple through Allied command networks almost immediately, reaching London intelligence offices who began to cross-reference it with existing reconnaissance. Each message added clarity, potential troop deployments, planned offensives, and strategic vulnerabilities. Inside Wilhelmstrasse, the first signs of disturbance were subtle. Logs did not match expectations. A routine file was missing. An officer noticed an unfamiliar shadow lingering on the floor plan. Alarm bells did not sound immediately, but suspicion began to creep through the ranks. German officers doubled their rounds, cross-checked messages, and interrogated clocks, but the trail was already cold. The spy had left no fingerprints, no visible breach, only gaps where human observation had been exploited. The consequences were immediate and profound. Allied commanders adjusted strategies based on the intelligence, reinforcing weak points and preparing countermoves against planned German operations. In North Africa, for instance, movement of supply convoys and troop rotations was modified. On the Eastern Front, Subtle shifts in German logistics were detected and anticipated, thanks to foreknowledge gained from the infiltrated intelligence. The impact of a single hour in Berlin reverberated across multiple theaters of war. German counterintelligence, now alerted, launched a comprehensive investigation. Every officer, clerk, and courier became a potential suspect. Security measures were tightened further, yet the psychological effect was more significant than any procedural adjustment. Paranoia seeped into the ranks. Trust eroded. Routine patrols became frantic. Minor mistakes were scrutinized, and operational efficiency suffered. Officers feared that every visitor, every shadow, every package could conceal another spy. The infiltration had achieved what few attacks could, destabilizing not just information flow, but the confidence of an entire intelligence apparatus. Meanwhile, the spy remained undetected, moving through Berlin's frozen streets with practiced precision. The operation was a testament to training, preparation, and human intuition. It highlighted a principle often overlooked in military strategy. No matter how many guards, locks, or codes are in place, the human element, adaptability, creativity, and courage can turn the tide. A single individual, invisible and patient, had extracted knowledge capable of shaping campaigns, influencing commanders, and altering the course of battles yet to come. By evening, reports began circulating among Allied intelligence. Officers noted the thoroughness of the German documentation and the precision of their routines. Analysts realized that the spy had not merely entered the building. He or she had outmaneuvered an entire security system, exploiting predictable human behavior and turning it into opportunity. The operation would later be cited as a classic example of how intelligence work, subtle and unseen, could outweigh conventional force. And yet, even as the operation succeeded, its long-term consequences were only beginning to unfold. German leaders increased scrutiny on every branch of intelligence, introducing stricter protocols, additional checks, and new vetting procedures. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Security was never again perceived as absolute. The realization that even double guards could be bypassed haunted the corridors of Wilhelmstrasse and the minds of its officers. In this climax, the spy's quiet triumph reshaped not only tactical plans but also the psychological landscape of war. The operation demonstrated the limits of brute force security, the power of human ingenuity, and the profound effects of intelligence that moved unseen. The infiltration was over, but its reverberations would shape military decisions, leadership behavior, and counterintelligence for months to come. The morning after the infiltration, Wilhelmstrasse was a hive of tension. Officers moved with heightened vigilance, reviewing security logs, comparing inventories, and rechecking access records. The missing documents, stolen with precision and subtlety, had exposed critical information about troop movements, upcoming offensives, and encrypted communications. Even a single misstep had sent ripples through German command, forcing rapid adjustments and emergency protocols. The intelligence obtained reached Allied hands within days. Analysts in London pored over photographs of the stolen documents, cross-referencing them with intercepted communications and reconnaissance reports. Suddenly, plans that had been opaque became clear. Locations of supply depots, the timing of reinforcements, and potential vulnerabilities in German deployments could now be anticipated. Military planners in multiple theaters began to act on this information, adjusting strategies in North Africa, France, and along the Eastern Front. For the Allies, what had been a daring act of infiltration became a strategic windfall. The impact on German operations was immediate. Troop deployments scheduled for the following week were delayed or rerouted, supply lines scrutinized, and communications procedures revised. The Abwehr convened emergency meetings, assigning officers to recheck the integrity of their networks and to monitor suspicious activities. Paranoia began to seep through the ranks. Every courier, clerk, and junior officer was now viewed with suspicion. Even minor deviations from routine were investigated. Doubled guards, once thought sufficient, were scrutinized for patterns, exposing weaknesses that the spy had already exploited. Beyond the physical security measures, the psychological consequences were profound. Officers questioned their own vigilance. Trust eroded between teams. The realization that a single operative could infiltrate their most fortified installation instilled a lingering anxiety that would influence decision-making for months. The morale of the intelligence staff wavered. Fear and suspicion became as potent as bullets or bombs. Leaders recognized that the human element, the assumptions and complacency of their personnel, was their most critical vulnerability. Meanwhile, the spy network responsible for the operation celebrated quietly. Success was measured not in headlines or public acclaim, but in strategic advantage and lives potentially saved. The operation validated the painstaking methods of observation, timing, and subtlety. Months of preparation had culminated in an hour of action that reshaped both immediate operations and long-term planning. And yet, the operation's consequences extended further than immediate tactical advantage. German leaders initiated extensive audits of other intelligence facilities, increased vetting of officers, and introduced more stringent counterintelligence protocols. Entire divisions were tasked with reviewing every aspect of internal security, from document storage to guard rotations. The infiltration had not merely obtained intelligence. It had exposed systemic weaknesses that could not be ignored. The ripple effects were clear. A single spy, acting with precision and discipline, could undermine not only operational plans but also the confidence, cohesion, and perceived invulnerability of an entire intelligence network. The stage was now set to explore the deeper, long-term repercussions in the second section of Aftermath, where we will examine strategic, psychological, and historical consequences. In the weeks that followed, the consequences of the infiltration unfolded across multiple theaters of war. Allied commanders used the intelligence to anticipate German movements, rerouting operations and reinforcing vulnerable positions. Supply convoys were adjusted, troop deployments delayed, and planned offensives reconsidered. In North Africa, For example, knowledge of German resupply schedules allowed British forces to intercept convoys more effectively, directly impacting the course of battles such as Tobruk and Gazala. On the Eastern Front, subtle shifts in German logistics were identified in advance, giving Soviet forces a crucial advantage in positioning and preparation. Within Germany, the psychological shock lingered far longer than any tactical adjustment. Officers became increasingly suspicious of one another. Commanders demanded stricter accountability, instituting layers of verification that slowed operations and created friction within the ranks. Security protocols were rewritten, keys reassigned, and communications encrypted more frequently. Yet no procedural change could fully erase the knowledge that their most secure building had been penetrated. Fear of another infiltration became a constant undercurrent, influencing decisions and shaping behavior for months to come. The operation also left a lasting mark on the broader intelligence community. Allied planners recognized the effectiveness of patient observation, timing, and subtle manipulation. Training programs incorporated lessons from the mission. Operatives were taught to exploit human complacency, anticipate predictable routines, and prioritize precision over brute force tactics. The infiltration became a case study in the power of small, disciplined teams to generate outsized impact in the shadow war of espionage. Meanwhile, individual officers on both sides were profoundly affected. In Berlin, clerks and mid-level officers faced intense scrutiny, often for months, as investigations sought to identify any internal lapses. Allied operatives reflected on the stakes of their work, understanding that the smallest error could reverse months of careful preparation. The human cost of espionage, stress, isolation, fear, was as real as the operational victories it produced. Ultimately, the infiltration demonstrated a pivotal truth of World War II. Intelligence could be as decisive as tanks, artillery, or aircraft. A single operative, armed only with skill, patience, and courage, had penetrated the heart of enemy security, extracting information that influenced strategy, shifted confidence, and reshaped perceptions of security. The reverberations of that hour-long operation extended far beyond Wilhelmstrasse, altering military calculations, leadership psychology, and the invisible landscape of intelligence warfare. And as historians would later note, the operation underscored that even the most formidable fortresses, bolstered by walls, guards, and codes, were never truly secure. The final act of this story, the reflection, will examine what this infiltration meant for history, human ingenuity, and the enduring lessons of espionage. History often measures war in battles won and cities taken, but the story of intelligence reminds us that conflict is also shaped in shadows. One spy, walking silently through the corridors of Wilhelmstrasse, changed the course of operations without firing a single shot. The audacity of that act, the precision and patience required, speaks to a broader truth. In war, knowledge is as lethal as any weapon. The infiltration revealed vulnerabilities not in walls or locks, but in human behavior, predictable routines, assumptions, and complacency. Security could be doubled, patrols multiplied, alarms installed, Yet ingenuity and observation could still find a way through. It is a lesson that resonates far beyond Berlin, far beyond 1941. The mind, disciplined and fearless, can achieve what brute force cannot. The psychological impact was profound. German intelligence, shaken by the breach, responded with tighter procedures, increased scrutiny, and pervasive suspicion. Allied planners, conversely, learned that patience, careful study, and subtle execution could tip the balance of power. The operation reshaped not only strategies and campaigns, but the way nations thought about secrecy, trust, and human capability in warfare. Ultimately, this story is about courage, the quiet, calculated courage of individuals operating unseen, and the courage to act despite overwhelming risk. It is about the invisible currents that move beneath the visible clash of armies, the decisions made in moments of silence that echo across theaters of war. The spy who walked past double guards reminds us that history is often determined not by who wields the largest army, but by who sees, understands, and acts where others believe security is absolute. In that winter of 1941, a single infiltration illuminated the delicate balance between vigilance and overconfidence, between human fallibility and ingenuity. It is a testament to the enduring power of intelligence, the art of observation, and the profound effects of one person's resolve. And while battles may rage and empires rise and fall, the lessons of that shadowed hour remain, clear, timeless, and quietly transformative.